Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a really fascinating intersection of psychology, tech, and sociology. We're going to look at how this digital age we're living in is literally rewiring two of our oldest, most basic human habits: how we keep our friendships alive and how we share a meal. We'll be drawing on two incredibly insightful research papers today, and honestly, what they reveal is that technology is a total double-edged sword. It can deeply compromise our real-world connections, but surprisingly, it can also hack our psychology to actually make us healthier.
So, how exactly is the digital age rewriting the basic rules of human connection? I want you to keep that question right at the back of your mind as we go through the research today. We usually think of our online and offline lives as just two different spaces for the exact same activities. But the data, it shows the psychological stakes are way higher than that. These platforms we use every day are actively rewriting the rules of how we relate to one another. And as you're going to see, the results are pretty wild.
Okay, let's dive into this by laying down our philosophical baseline. To figure out what tech is actually changing, we first need to agree on what a true friend really is. Way back when, the philosopher Aristotle defined the ultimate form of connection as disinterested friendship. Now hold on, that doesn't mean you aren't interested in the person. It just means you value the bond purely for what it is. It's not some instrumental friendship where you're only hanging out with someone because they're a good networking connection or they boost your status. In a true disinterested friendship, that person is completely irreplaceable. They are the end goal, not just a stepping stone.
Right, so our second ancient baseline is more physical. It's the act of commensality. That's really just a fancy academic term for eating together. Sharing a meal is so much more than just getting calories in. It is a fundamental social glue for us humans. The research absolutely backs this up, showing that eating with others fosters deep bonding, boosts our emotional and physical well-being, and really cuts down on feelings of isolation. Get this, it even makes good food physically taste better to us. So there we have it. Authentic, irreplaceable friendship and the shared joy of a meal. These are the bedrock foundations of human connection.
Section 1. The bureaucracy of digital friendship. But what happens when those ancient foundations smash right into the modern digital attention economy? Well, this brings us to our first source text. It's a deep dive into digital capitalism, and it shows how social media is just totally disrupting that offline baseline we just talked about. The researchers point out a really stark contrast. Remember Aristotle's unquantifiable deep friendship on the left? Contrast that with digital friendship on the right. Social media platforms are literally built to quantify our connections. Suddenly, friendships become entirely metric-driven. We're curating these perfect profiles, constantly trying to rack up likes, views, and followers. The digital world subtly shifts our brains, right? It turns our friends into an audience, and it transforms the relationship from a beautiful end in itself into just another instrumental tool to boost our own online visibility.
To put some hard numbers to the shift, the research looked at Facebook users. Now, people usually have hundreds of connections on there, usually around 100 to 300 on average. But only about 25% of those are considered actual friends. That means a massive 75% are just casual contacts. But here's the kicker. The platform slaps the exact same label, friend, on every single one of them. It completely flattens all those rich, complex layers of human connection into one single, easily trackable data point.
And this spirals into something even more pervasive: 2.5 times. Researchers found that the average user silently surveys 2.5 times more people online than they ever actively talk to. I mean, really think about that. We are all engaged in what scholars call participatory surveillance. We are just quietly watching the curated lives of others, and they're quietly watching ours. It takes friendship from being an active, spontaneous thing and turns it into this weird passive performance for a totally silent audience.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core problem here. It's perfectly captured in a quote from the source material by Lambert, who says, "Friendships are bureaucratized, while the labor of intimacy is intensified." Because your friendships are now living out in the open, highly visible to everyone, you basically have to manage them like a PR campaign. You're untagging bad photos, doing reputation management, strategically handing out your likes. The messy, fun spontaneity of true friendship gets completely replaced by the stressful, tedious bureaucracy of managing your profile.
Section 2. The solo dining problem. So, the digital world is definitely complicating our friendships. But what about the physical world? Let's pivot back to our second baseline.
eating together. Thanks to crazy busy lifestyles, city living, and way more people living alone, we're seeing a massive surge in solo dining. We are literally eating alone more than at any other point in human history. And this takes a huge psychological toll. Eating alone all the time cranks up loneliness, makes us feel totally isolated, and actually drags down our overall diet quality. So the fix is easy, right? Just eat with other people. Well, not quite. The researchers highlight a really tricky dilemma called the social facilitation of eating. Turns out, when we dine with others, we walk right into a hidden health risk.
The data from our second source text reveals a truly fascinating dynamic. When people eat by themselves, their preference for unhealthy junk food is actually pretty low. But the second they eat in person with other people, that preference for unhealthy food skyrockets. Why does that happen? It's all about social conformity. We naturally use rich, heavy, calorie-dense foods to celebrate and bond with each other. So yes, eating in person absolutely cures our loneliness, but it also exposes us to major peer pressure, social modeling, and this overwhelming temptation to overindulge.
Section 3. Cloud-based commensality.
Okay, so this leaves us in a pretty tough spot. Eat alone and feel terrible, or eat together and derail your health. But here is where technology steps in with a really surprising, optimistic twist: cloud-based commensality. Our second source text explores this as a sort of technological hack where people find digital dining companions to cure their physical isolation. The researchers looked at two main ways people are using screens to avoid eating alone right now. The first is mukbang. This is that massive internet trend where you watch a host eat these huge, crazy portions of food on a broadcast while you sit and eat your own meal. The second is true cloud-based commensality. This is way simpler. It's basically just hopping on a FaceTime or Zoom call with a real, actual friend who is also eating their meal wherever they are.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these different setups totally mess with our psychology and our diets. Look at the breakdown. In-person dining heavily reduces loneliness, but it pushes your unhealthy eating way up. Mukbang, it completely fails to fix the problem. Because you're literally watching someone else gorge themselves, it triggers social comparison and makes you want to eat more junk food, all while barely making a dent in your loneliness because it's just a one-sided parasocial relationship. But check out cloud-based dining. It hits the absolute perfect psychological sweet spot. You get a high reduction in loneliness combined with a surprisingly low intake of unhealthy food.
The researchers realized that cloud-based commensality creates this totally unique alone but together vibe. Think about it. When you video call your best friend during dinner, you're getting that deep, authentic interaction. You feel their presence, and that completely wipes out the loneliness. But, and this is the genius part, because your friend is physically somewhere else, maybe even in a different time zone, eating a totally different kind of meal, that subconscious peer pressure to eat a bunch of junk food just vanishes. Technology is literally hacking our psychology here. It gives us the warmth of friendship without the shared social pressure of bad eating habits. A real game changer.
Section 4. Navigating modern digital connection.
So what does this all mean? How do we actually make sense of all this? We've looked at a super critical view of how platforms commodify our friendships, but we've also seen this really optimistic view of how digital tools can actually protect our health and our connections. It's time to pull the whole shebang together. So the crucial point is this: digital tools aren't inherently good or evil. It's all about how we use them. If we just passively scroll through social media, the dark side takes over. It bureaucratizes our relationships and turns our irreplaceable friends into just another metric-driven audience. But look at the bright side. If we are active and intentional, like setting up a virtual dinner date with a specific irreplaceable friend, we can completely bypass geographical isolation, avoid the peer pressure of junk food, and genuinely nourish our emotional well-being.
Which brings us right to our final thought. If there's one thing the research makes crystal clear, it's that surviving the digital age requires serious intentionality. You are the one in control of how these tools are deployed. So, I'm going to leave you with this to reflect on regarding your own daily digital diet. Will you let technology bureaucratize your friendships into mere data points, or will you use it to intentionally nourish your mind, your body, and your truest connections? Think about that the very next time you open an app or sit down for a meal. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.